Hafide, welcome to another episode of ReelTalk, where you can catch everything about new movies coming out and our favorite actors, actresses, as well as directors. But before we get into today's topic, I just want to remind you, thank you to our sponsors, Tango Theaters, where you can watch Detective Pikachu this weekend, the real-life Pokemon movie,
so
right?
Cute.
Yeah, I know, and that's Ryan Reynolds plays. He plays Pikachu, and Pikachu talks. Because in in Pokemon, the cartoon, Pikachu only ever says Pikachu, right? Like all the Pokemons, they don't talk; they just say their name. But this one, Ryan Reynolds plays the voice of Pikachu.
So is it going to be? I'm assuming if Ryan Reynolds is a voice, then it's going to be witty, and are they going to kind of do what they did with the Lego movie?
Yeah, they kind of made him like snarky, and he's pop witty
culture references.
Funny how they actually cast the guy who played Deadpool, the only Marvel movie ever to gain an R rating, as Pikachu, who's like universally like the symbol of cuteness.
No, but that's like what he said. They took it and they made it more.
Will
like
the character be breaking the fourth wall and like talk directly into camera?
I don't know. I haven't watched the movie yet, so I'm gonna try to watch it this Friday.
Because then the character,
hence,
then the character will peek at you.
Whew. On that note,
He'll peek at you.
I am your host, Ken Singleton. I'm joined by Marie, the boss, and Jason, and we have Uncle Kin over here on the side, and Asha behind the camera.
Enjoying some chips.
And we're having a little fun today, but our topic is starts on a kind of a sadder tangent. John Singleton, the award-winning and acclaimed director, died last week at the age of 51. I think it was 51 or 54. And then, so today, in honor of him, we're going to talk about his career and his body of work and our favorite John Singleton movies. And that's why Marie's here, because that is one of Marie's favorite directors.
Yes.
Because we are roughly, you and I are the same age, but John Singleton, he's 6 years older than us, so he can be considered a peer.
Yeah,
You went to film school in part because of inspired by John Singleton, right?
Well, no, I think that he came when I was in film school. He first emerged on the scene, and I just found him to be such an inspiration because when I'm always like, I do that deep dive when something interests me, like a film or an actor or whatever, and
or criticism of your fellow coworkers.
So I worked. I'm gonna punch you. Sorry,
that's gonna happen.
I do not condone violence, but sometimes Jason really asks for it.
She doesn't condone it, but I incite it, right?
So I remember reading about this. I was so impressed with Boyz N Da Hood, which came out in what year was it? 1994.
No, that was 91.
91.
Speaking of violence, ironically.
Yeah. So I was so inspired that I read up on it, and it's like, wow. The writer and director is this guy that just came out of USC film school, and I just felt like he told an amazing story that had not been told in such a gritty, gripping way, and it really transcended. It was about where he grew up and the environment he grew up in, but it transcended all of that, where it had this mass appeal, and really it really affected me, one, because I just felt like his writing and the way it was executed was so pure, and the character development, there were so many iconic characters
that launched a career of so many people,
and on top of that too, he saw at the time Ice Cube wasn't a big Hollywood actor. He was a rapper, so that was kind of a breakout role for him. Regina King, who can forget that? That was one of her first roles. Look at her now. She's this amazing Oscar-winning actress.
I always kind of defer Regina King's role in that movie just because Yo-Yo was so much more of the focal point. She had the great lines, and she always had that comedic back and forth with Ice Cube so many times. Wait, was it Yo-Yo?
I don't know.
Yeah. It was Yo-Yo.
Cuba Gooding Jr. was in it too.
Mm-hmm. That was not his first movie. A lot of people make the mistake.
Is that Morris Chestnut?
Morris Chestnut.
But Cuba Gooding
Ricky. Sorry.
Okay.
We could go on reciting lines now.
For purposes of context and everything, she made all of us swear, specifically me, that we would not do voices.
No, I didn't say it.
Lines.
Well, it's anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're going.
But
that was a great. That was a really, really disturbing, arresting scene that so many people would replay mentally for years because they were like, wow, can you imagine what that would be like if your brother was slain right in front of you, and you had to like.
But it also had elements of the classics, and that was so brilliant about the way that John Singleton wrote. I mean, of like a Greek tragedy, right? He was the one destined for greatness. So you know, it was so relevant to that day and age and what was happening in that community, but also it was just a classic storytelling at its finest.
On that point, one of the things I really appreciated about John Singleton as a filmmaker. Like you said, I think he did all the directing. I think he did the majority of the writing, and I think he was his own director of photography, like a lot of the time, because the opening scene of Boyz N Da Hood, you know, there's that stop sign from way, and it goes. And
he wasn't the DP. I'm just sorry, I'm being a film geek. No, but as a director, that's what you do.
He had
work
hands-on,
with the DP to.
But then the camera
shots.
like goes all the way up, and like it has this like, you know, it's slowing as it gets closer, and then it stops right in front of like the stop sign. There's no dialogue. There's no background music, there's no background natural sound, and everything, it just goes on stop, and it's so powerful. And you know, it's funny because like today, 30 odd years later, we're in Instagram stories and we're doing Snapchat, and everybody's like trying to, you know, communicate visually, and he really broke a lot of ground in
and
that. Like when you said when Morris Chestnut got shot, that whole sequence was in slow motion. And he's not the first one to do stuff in slow motion, but I mean, so much of the way the story was told visually lent so much to the impact of like just how emotional that movie was.
And sometimes I think in this case, or in the case of Boyz N Da Hood and some of his other work, it's that you let the neighborhood was a central character as well, if you will, and it's simplicity, right? You let it speak for itself. It's a telling way. It's not all about the dialogue or which I think is a mistake in a lot of films now, between over-the-top effects or lengthy dialogue, corny dialogue. It was a story that just unfolded so naturally and organically.
Compton was a central character, right?
And I think that's true too. Like it's the first time we ever got that type of perspective into inner city life, right, in the hood, I guess, right?
And there were so many movies that followed that.
Yeah, I mean, but that's probably the movie that did it the best. And I mean, even though it was a predecessor to so many films of its kind, like Menace to Society or similar
South
films,
Central.
I don't think any film ever really captured that type of culture as well as Boyz N Da Hood, right? And I mean, he was like 24 years old when he made that film, which is kind of crazy.
He wrote to what he knew, right?
Yeah.
And
which should be, that's aspiring to any young filmmaker, I think, like to, you know, I think it's like, I'm assuming a lot of filmmakers' dreams to cover their own culture or their own background in a story and like present it to a wider audience, right?
Yeah, so I think like with me, I think when you're, as a film student at the time, it really made me feel like, wow, I can tell the story about where I'm from, and it can just be as interesting, you know, that you just write what you know, and
and the way he's
so impactful.
Again, we're going over just what an amazing triumph of storytelling this was. The movie was basically told in two parts. There's Trey and Furious Styles, you know, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Lawrence Fishburne, respectively, when they were young, and like Trey gets in all sorts of trouble, and his mom. Why am I forgetting who played his mom?
I forgot her name.
She was she was Tina Turner.
No, she wasn't.
No.
Yes, she was. Angela Bassett.
Angela Bassett, thank you. So there's a time when he's living with Angela Bassett. She's divorced from Furious Styles. Trey gets in a bunch of trouble. She goes, "You're going to go live with your father in the inner city because I'm trying to go to law school and, you know, like improve myself, and you're too much of a headache." So he goes there. Fast forward, 7, 8, 10 years, whatever it is, and everything, and now he's a senior in high school, and, you know, Ice Cube just comes out of the pen, and, you know, it's
a classic coming of age tale.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, it's a rite of passage, just like anything, like Star Wars, you could say was a
that having been said, though, I mean, we all have universal praise, and many people do for this film. What are parts of that movie in particular that don't hold up well to you?
I don't know.
I'd say nothing.
I think that movie's pretty good.
There's one scene to me
iconic.
that was just a little bit too obvious, and just, you know, it's a little too predictable. It's when, okay, so, you know, they're all studying hard, and the recruiter from USC comes out to Ricky's house, and he goes, you know, young man, you can be whatever you want. Oh, here's my tape. And what was funny about that scene is that the little baby comes running out from the room. He's like, "Wow!" And the recruiter's like, "Oh, is that your little brother?" He goes, "No, that's my son." And back then, like in the early 90s, it was still really, really weird for you to be in high school and have a child of your own.
And you're speaking from where you're from.
Yeah.
But that's not the case.
It was disturbing.
So
what
culture. About that didn't you like?
But then the fact that that Ricky really had to apply himself and take the SAT because he goes, "Oh man, you know, like I'm really not good in, you know, with my grades." And he goes, "As long as you get like an 850." Yeah. And then when Ricky is ultimately slain, they bring his body home. You know, he's bleeding out all over the couch and everything like that. The mail happened to just arrive that morning, and the first thing the mom does is, you know, her son is there just dead, and she walks over to the table, opens up the thing, and it says, "Congratulations, you've passed the SAT, you've been accepted, you know, as a pre-frosh to the University of Southern California." I thought that was a little bit too...
No, but
now I feel like you're harping on the minutia.
Such a great...
That was the only part of the movie that I just thought was a little
He
too
was a first-time filmmaker, and you're harping on minutia. That's like a little tiny scene.
Everything else about that movie is brilliant.
I didn't like Boyz N Da Hood because of that one scene.
I'm not saying I didn't like the movie.
That's the way that you're acting.
No, I'm just saying
that
one scene was just...
Sorry.
I mean,
forgot we were being
to be 24 years old and be the youngest person ever to be nominated for the director for that's, I mean,
okay, and now
we can give him
and
that.
to have a Hollywood budget film, it wasn't like, you know, now it's commonplace. There's so many indie filmmakers, DIY, and again, you know, they have the tools of the trade. But back then, I mean, that was actually produced by, what was the production? Was it New Line Cinema?
So.
It might
I
be
think it was New Line,
yeah. So I mean, think about what an amazing feat that was. So I don't think it's fair to harp on like a tiny little. It's not even a full scene. It was like one aspect of a scene that you're.
But just that sequence, it was, and it
obviously stuck with you.
I mean, it's a powerful scene.
It's very emotional, and it's played very, very well, and it's shot beautifully. It's just like, okay, you know, that's a little. For me, it was like a little too obvious that you would do that.
I mean, I can't even think of a movie before that like applied that.
The ending of the movie is incredibly powerful because, you know, the day after Ricky dies, Ice Cube's character Doughboy walks across the street from his house. Trey comes from his house. They talk in the middle of the street. Then he goes, and, you know, Doughboy's all, you know, despondent. Then he goes, "Man, I have no more brothers left." And he's like, "Man, you got one more brother left in this world. You still got one." Then he goes,
I thought you were going to talk about the other iconic line, like, they don't know, they don't show, or they don't care about the hood.
There you go.
See, but just the fact that we're sitting here, how many years later?
But then he turns around and then they fade
decades.
Ice Cube out, and then he goes, 2 weeks later, Doughboy was murdered in front of his house. And it's
a movie that came out like that long ago, and we're recounting these like real specific details. We know every character's name. We remember. That just shows what an iconic piece of work it was, an iconic body of work. So, I mean, I think we're pretty much, that's our consensus.
Okay, right now where he went at this is the part where we're going to completely diverge, because I believe his next project was Higher Learning.
No, it was Poetic Justice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Poetic Justice came out before? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so chronologically, we'll do Poetic Justice.
So Poetic Justice, it was kind of like an ode to women, I think. I think there was some criticism about the depiction of women in Boyz N Da Hood. So for his second project, which also amazed me because he took the works of Maya Angelou and wove them into this story about a woman, and it was kind of.
I really like that, how they have the running dialogue with poetry.
It was
I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me.
Tread on a sacred cow.
No, it's a beautiful
butcher
line.
The poetry of Maya Angelou.
I'm not butchering it all. Okay. I have nothing but high praise for Maya Angelou, and and the fact that they actually echoed that sentiment throughout the movie, which is what you were saying. I thought it was brilliant.
Because Justice she was a writer, and so all the poetry featured were the works of Maya Angelou. Yeah. And fun fact, Maya Angelou actually had a cameo in that movie.
That's right.
She was in The Picnic. There were 3 aunties. See, this is how you know I'm such a John Singleton. There are 3 aunties. Auntie May, Auntie April, and Auntie June.
All have the shirt, right? The Johnson family reunion.
Yeah, they were at the, I don't know, was it John? So they were at the picnic, at the family reunion, and they were gossiping. Anyway, so that's my fun fact.
That's crazy. I didn't even know that.
I have a critique on Poetic Justice, though.
Oh,
No, honestly, because I read the screenplay ahead of time.
I thought we can't speak.
I was so excited for this movie. I love Maya Angelou. I didn't feel like Janet Jackson knocked it out of the park. I didn't feel like she was that great of an actress, and I also didn't feel like she didn't embody what the vision or the person that I had in my head when I read.
I got
the
crapped on by saying the scene with like an SAT score was a little bit obvious. She just knocked Janet Jackson. Wow.
No, but Janet Jackson's not that great of an actress, right?
Whoa.
Like, is she?
It was a very.
I'm gonna sit over here just in case lightning comes down, and I don't want to get.
I can't think of what movies she's in.
It was a difficult role to play too, because she was someone who just.
That's a good point.
She
what
lost
Janet been in?
her boyfriend tragically. She was really jaded.
That was also Regina King.
introverted. Regina King was her best friend.
Yeah.
And you know what I really loved about it too? I'm sorry, guys. I could just
No, it's
do
okay.
like a monologue. But the road trip.
Now that we basically said Janet Jackson sucks.
I went through a phase where I just loved road trip movies, and the film was also designed to be that road trip movie. It was the progression, because the road trip movie, it's a literal road trip, but then you also show where the characters go from point A to point B, where between their relationship, how they grow, as
The whole movie
individuals.
takes place over 2 days, right?
So that build. I thought Tupac was phenomenal. I really think Tupac would have been, at this point, had he not been killed,
He was great in
would
that
have been
movie.
an Oscar
Wait,
award-winning actor.
who was the
I
opposite?
think.
Who was the actor opposite Regina King's love interest? Was it Alan Payne? No.
No, it was like a comedian.
I don't know.
Joe Torre.
It may have been.
I believe it was Joe Torre. Yeah.
Yeah. Chicago.
Yeah.
And
But they went from what? They went from South Central LA up to Oakland.
They were going for a hair show. He was sorry. I'm like the
It's like Marie
biggest-
wrote Marie
They were
part
going
of the
for a
script.
Can you
hair
tell
show.
she's watched this movie a
Tupac
couple
was
times?
a postal worker, and Janet Jackson was a hairdresser, and Regina King knew Tupac's friend, and so they found a way to get to the hair show that was going to save money, but they had to ride in the postal truck.
You know what I like? Also the fact that the soundtrack wasn't completely every single thing was by Janet Jackson. The song again was kind of like the overriding love theme. Beautiful song.
That was
I don't
a
know
nice
about
song, right? That was a good song.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
okay.
Janet Jackson. I don't know about
Honestly,
these guys.
no. For all I can critique about her acting, that song was amazing.
Yeah,
you know,
that was-
another.
Wait, what else has Janet Jackson been in? Because Ken brought that up. She was in Different Strokes when she was
She
a
was
little
in like
kid.
those Tyler Perry movies,
Was she?
which I don't really care for
remember.
either.
Oh.
But they also used. There was a great use of, again. Everybody who's watching this is going to think I'm the biggest film geek after. But there was a really good scene, and actually Janet Jackson was good in this scene, I think, where they played this Stevie Wonder song, and everyone loves Stevie Wonder, but I had never heard I Never Dreamed You'd Leave in Summer. And more than Janet Jackson's acting, because it was at a very solemn scene where she's kind of reflecting, she's on her own, and she's really sad and melancholy. But when they played that, it just like the words just made my skin, like I got goosebumps, because if you listen to the lyrics in that song, it's just beautiful.
Did Tupac have? He had one song, I believe, that was on the soundtrack.
I don't.
It was a lesser known song, but I believe it's when they were on their road trip.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, so we all like Poetic Justice.
Yeah.
Some of us
For the
more than
most part,
others.
Yeah.
Okay, so then he did
Higher Learning.
in 1994. 93. He did Higher Learning, which I actually really, really enjoyed because Marie and I are both high school class of 1992. The early 90s had, this coming of age series of films, like you had, Higher Learning, where people went to college. House Party 2 was all about going to a university. With Honors, with Brendan Fraser and Moira Kelly and Joe Pesci, was about going to college, like at Harvard. A whole bunch of, Singles and everything was about being, on your own and finding your independence. Higher Learning I really, really enjoyed because it showed the diversity when you go to like a big, generic university. He brought Lawrence Fishburne back as this old professorial, wise person who was also very, very street smart. He brought Ice Cube back, who was this like incredibly brilliant philosophy major apparently, who they kind of tongue-in-cheek reveal. It's like, oh haha, at the end of the movie reveal his name is Mr. White because he's so militant and he's kind of like the leader of a particular group of people. And then you've got Michael Rappaport, who's the doofy white kid who doesn't really fit in everywhere and winds up hanging out with what's that actor's name that you really like?
Omar Epps?
No, from the Supremacists, the white supremacists. He was in
Why don't you look it up on IMDb?
Cole Hauser.
Cole Hauser.
Yeah. And they just have all of these groups and everything like that. I thought it was Jennifer Connelly was there, and she Christy Swanson, and they had this whole thing about being kind of confused about their sexuality, and I really really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. I thought the death scene with Tyra Banks was the female track
fun
star.
fact, they were dating at the time.
Who?
I know, like,
Omar Epps and
no, John Singleton and Tyra Banks dated for a time.
Ah,
wow.
Okay. So there's
could be an entertainment
there's
from the 90s.
There's my fandom right there. I thought it was wonderfully shot. I thought it was wonderfully told. I really like the array of characters and the diversity. Why do you not like it? Because you have been steadfast all the years I've known you that you do not like this film.
I didn't like it. It just wasn't my favorite because I felt like it tried too hard. It tried to be too many things to too many people. It really, and maybe, I mean, in its defense, though, I could see people saying, well, that's the way college is. It's a melding of different, I don't know. I'm thinking like with the way of the world right now, with everything happening, maybe if I go back and watch it, I'll like it a little bit more. But at the time, I just didn't feel like it was really reflective. It really played on stereotypes and caricatures of different types of people. But I mean, I'll give it a watch again because I mean, maybe like in hindsight, or maybe it's still reflective of what's happening. But at the time, it just didn't feel authentic to me.
John Singleton again, he did his brilliant visualization of concepts. The ending scene of the movie is Lawrence Fishburne, going there with his cob pipe, walking down, those very hallowed marble.
Arguably, you're a bigger John Singleton fan than you.
Walking down those steps,
like remember details.
Yeah, walking down those steps, out of a university library. So he's walking literally out of a hall, a tome of knowledge, and then he goes from every mountainside, and the camera pans up, let freedom, and then there's the U.S. flag. After there's been this horrific campus shooting, and groups have to figure out how to come together. Christy Swanson, like, she shakes hands with Omar Epps.
You should do a one act. What would be cool? Maybe you should do like a one-man act of like reenactments of John Singleton movies.
I would not mind. I know one thing I'm not doing is I'm not crapping on Janet Jackson because
I did not crap on. I just said she wasn't the person I had in my head to play Justice in Poetic Justice, and so I was disappointed. Now it's been too long. That you bring it up. I don't even remember who's an amazing actresses of the day. Like maybe Nia Long, who was in Boyz N Da Hood, or Halle Berry. Was Halle Berry even around yet? I don't remember.
I was going to say Halle Berry.
It's too far, yeah. And it's done. It's a work of and it was an iconic role for her. Like a lot of people remember that profile shot of Janet Jackson.
Okay, so we agree to disagree on this, El Capitan. Well,
I like higher learning.
You break the tie, huh?
I like higher learning. Yeah. I was young. I was like I was 8th grade or 7th grade when that came out. So I mean, I was like, oh, that's what college is like. That's crazy.
Yes, he was
exactly. I thought when I went to UOG, I was like, that's what college is going to be like.
No,
I was like, man, look at Christy Swanson's in college. I can't wait to go to college.
When I went to college in the in the East Coast, and then that's why I kind of felt like it was contrived because I'm like, it's not really reflective of my college experience, but it could have just been me. Like, I don't know. I'll watch it again and weigh in.
I thought it was okay. I liked it. How about he did a bunch of other movies following that, but I like The Baby Boy.
I like Baby Boy.
I thought it was gonna be so dumb, and like it is kind of silly, but I actually thought it was pretty powerful and I guess satirical, but it really throws to the element of being a single father or a young man trying to find your path.
And kind of like
world,
a lovable loser, right?
Yeah.
Like someone that just can't get it right, but they're a good. And I think, again, like what we were talking about with Boyz N Da Hood, that's something that transcends like a certain type of culture or upbringing. It's universal. Yeah. Who doesn't know a guy like Jody? See, I remember I loved like I really liked that movie. And to me, it was a
was
great
funny
comeback
movie.
because there were a couple of misses for me for him
Like
before Baby Boy. And so when that came back, I said, wow, this is classic, strong characters. Taraji P. Henson was amazing. And we were talking about how that might have been,
This is pre Empire.
yeah, that
Yeah.
shot her
Okay,
up
yeah.
to stardom.
I remember watching Baby Boy. I saw it on Cinemax one night, because obviously it had a theatrical run, and I caught it, and I was like, wow. My reactions to it at the time, I was like, man, this is a long movie. It's very, very powerful. Ving Rhames stole the show, I thought.
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
variety of, like, the love scene with Ving Rhames, he's like hopping across, like, I mean, look that up on YouTube. This is a family podcast.
But that's like a lot of like guys with like single moms. They
Yeah.
can attest to things like that too, like having that stepfather that just they hate and that they don't
th-
feel treats their mother
And
well.
then at the end of it,
Like,
he's like, he's there, like, what? He's working in the garden or something like that, and then he's like, oh, keep your head up, Jody, and he's like, oh, what do you know about this music? And then he makes peace with him, and they find some common ground. But I also remember seeing this at this point. I was like, man, I like the movie. I really wish that John Singleton. He's good at amazing at what he did at that point, telling those stories from the inner city perspective. I was hoping he would have tried to tell like different stories at some point, because I thought it was okay. It's
wait,
I'm
are
not
you
gonna,
talking about within Baby Boy?
no,
Or
just like
as in,
Oh, but
like overall.
but
I
he
mean, I'm not.
did. I mean, he
he did fast,
he
fast,
did
too fast, too
Fast-
Well, there you go.
Fast
No,
and
because I'm also
Furious, he
thinking,
did Shaft.
like look at Peter Jackson, right? Before he became known as the guy who did the Lord of the Rings trilogy and King Kong, he did this super low budget, but amazing horror movie when he was still in Australia called Dead Alive. Spielberg did a bunch of projects before he,
Again,
before he did Jaws and before he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind and before he did, E.T.
I don't feel like he was like a one-trick pony.
No,
like,
I didn't. But at that point in his career, I was like, okay, Baby Boy was good, but I was like, man, I would hope he would kind of broaden his range.
I mean,
think
if
he
your
did,
first hit out of
yeah.
is a home run, like if the first thing you ever did was like,
And there's
Sweet.
so
Yeah, that's a good- that's a good
it's
point.
And then
like-
there's, that's kind of like, you can't be restricted to one story from where you grew up. Or there's so many. Think about Guam. Think about how many stories we can tell from different, about different people and different relatives, and they'd all be different. And some of them, like Baby Boy was more comedic, right? And Boyz N Da Hood was more of like a Greek tragedy. So there's Poetic Justice was like a story of a redemption kind of, or like finding love again. So a love story. So you can't limit it to say, oh, just because it was about the
For sure.
inner city.
And it was my own naivete.
They were all unique stories.
Why I felt that way, and because I was a fan of John Singleton's work and the way he made movies, I was like, I was kind of hoping he'd break into something else, which is why, and I know we'll talk about this at some point, when he made Four Brothers.
Which is also another tale of, that's another
and it's from
aspect
the
of-
other side of the,
But it's not
the continent. You know what I mean?
That's a
East
different
Coast, which I think
area.
is really,
It's not the
really-
East Coast; it's the Midwest.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But that's still,
right.
that
How can
goes,
you forget that? We've had hundreds of
No,
discussions
because it's
in the
Mark Wahlberg, so I always think, oh yeah, Mark Wahlberg
Yeah, you
must
think
be from like
Boston,
Boston, but
Asha, who's working
But
the
that
camera
just
right now,
shows how
loves
strong
Four Brothers as well.
his characters were so
Yeah.
strong that it didn't matter what the scenario, setting was. They just had that mass appeal.
Okay, and now you might think that he had like a series of misses, or just not. I mean, maybe Shaft was commercially successful, but not a lot of people like Shaft.
Sure.
First of all, that's a really hard thing to do, which is take the Rudy Ray Moore classic. Was it Rudy Ray Moore? Richard Roundtree. I'm sorry, Rudy Ray Moore. The Richard Roundtree classic, and the song, and that whole ethos of the superhero in the inner city, and redo it, and I mean, great director, great actor in Samuel L. Jackson. It's just a lot of people just didn't buy it.
yeah, maybe phone that one in.
Reboots
Yeah,
are
Christian Bale,
difficult.
yeah. Do you think? Oh, on that note, do you think they would ever remake any of the John Singleton films, like a Boyz N Da Hood, like a new Boyz N Da Hood?
Man, I hope not.
I thought about this the other night.
I hope not.
I would love to see a retelling of Poetic Justice, but with someone like Zendaya, like
Zendaya,
or cast as because it was I don't know. I just think that it was it was a love story that I feel like it didn't. You could add touches to modernize it a bit, but it transcends one period in time.
I think that would be a good choice too. I think a lot of these movies could be remade. I don't know if they should.
You know who I would personally like to see play Janet Jackson's character in Poetic Justice? Who plays Gamora?
Oh, Zoe Saldana.
Zoe Saldana.
She's too old. She's too old for that role.
Or how about the Valkyrie girl? What's her name?
Tessa Thompson?
Tessa Thompson.
Oh, that'd be good.
She might be good.
Good actress.
And wait, is she British or does she just put on a British accent?
I don't know.
Okay, can we talk? This is kind of on a tangent, but you brought up the reboot thing, right? Can you name a successful reboot? Because none come to mind. A Star is Born. Duh. I just answered my own question. But like...
Oh, wait, is that a reboot or a remake? Because there's reboots, remakes, retellings, or are we just
different.
Well, it's a
accepting them as
whatever.
synonymous?
It's a something of it, and yeah, I guess Star is Born. Well, I don't remember the older one, so I can't think of.
Or is it too soon to do a redo?
I think if like we thought about it a little more, didn't we do an episode?
Yeah,
Okay,
remakes.
let me go back and the podcast, KUM Podcast Network Library, and look up what you guys said. But I always wonder about that. And that's something I do when I watch movies now. Like, if we were to remake this, who would I cast? Like, it's a little game I play in my head.
That would
again,
be
being a film
really,
geek.
really hard because John Singleton, again, his visual style was so unique to him. A lot of people are going to expect those scenes to be reshot almost the same. And if you didn't, they'd say, okay, well, you're a terrible filmmaker. If they just left it out and said, I don't want to touch that because,
But
that's...
see, my thing...
Then they say, okay, well, you screwed up because you didn't shoot that one scene, like the thing with the stop sign. Or
Again, I don't want to harp on what you're feeling because that's the connection you have. But for me personally, I don't really feel like the beauty of what he did with the stuff that I liked was in the cinematography per se. I thought it was more the storytelling, the character development. So it's not so much the visuals, but obviously different things speak to different people. They speak to you, and I don't know. You could look up who if he used the same cinematographer for all of his films or if he switched it up. But to me, it's just that strong character development because
it had some of the best dialogue.
You remember every name. I mean, if we did a trivia quiz right now, you'd remember every name of every character in Boyz N Da Hood, Poetic Justice, but higher
Little
learning.
Chris was the kid who
And what does
had
that
like the
say?
Jerry
To
curl, he's
me,
running around, and
that
then all of a
says-
sudden he's like, he's got like the he's got the baby pacifier, and he's like, oh wait, I gotta check in with my parole officer, and he's in a wheelchair.
And you know what caused that? Excellent character development
Yeah.
from the page to the film.
And John Singleton pulled no punches. Like a lot of the stories he told were not pretty. They were very, very sad. But that's real life.
Did you guys ever watch Snowfall? That was his. He
Was that the one with
created
Chris
it.
Evans?
No, it was a recent one.
Snowpiercer. I'm sorry.
Snowfall was about the crack cocaine epidemic, the beginning of it in Los Angeles. It was a television series.
Can we skip ahead to Four Brothers?
You mentioned Four Brothers.
But we must pay tribute.
Four Brothers is my favorite John Singleton movie. That's my favorite John Singleton movie.
It's
That's
the one I've seen the
movies.
most.
It's one of my favorite.
I like
movies.
it,
I don't think
yeah.
it's like better than Boyz N Da Hood. But
You liked it the most.
I just like it. I just got Mark Wahlberg, so I'm already like, all right, Mark Wahlberg's in the movie.
I love the dynamic,
Yeah.
right, between.
And I think like even Terrence Howard's in it. Like I think, what's the guy who plays the villain or the main bad guy?
The one whose name we can never. The guy's won an Academy Award for 12 Years a Slave.
Chiwetley Ejiofor, whatever his name is, Ejiofor, whatever his name is, has him, and that was before
And he was good.
like
before 12 Years.
yeah, 12 Years a Slave.
Dogs gotta eat, right? Eat. Did you tell him?
Again.
Outside
name.
shooters. Outside shooters.
Outside
And
shooters.
for your next
What did I say?
bonus podcast,
Out of
Jason.
town shooters. Now what do I have? In town shooters. In town cops.
You know what we should have done?
In-town
You should have
problems.
made an interactive trivia game where you just recite dialogue and people have to say what movie it's
Well,
from.
I would say Four Brothers probably the most quotable. I've always looked at Four Brothers not as a drama, not as an action. I've always seen it as like a really good murder mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they take... Okay, Mark Wahlberg is obviously the most accomplished actor, right? But you got Mark Wahlberg, Tyrese, who's, he's done a few projects, but he played Angel
He's good.
pretty well.
He's good if he's cast in the right role.
You've got
Garrett Hedlund.
Garrett Hedlund, who if that guy retired today, give that dude a
Wait, was
star in the
that
Hollywood
Sofia
Walk of Fame.
Vergara in it? Oh my
Yeah, that's
gosh!
Sofia
I just
Vergara.
realized
Okay,
that.
but Garrett
Tyrese's
Hedlund,
girlfriend.
he played Patroclus in Troy. opposite Brad Pitt, or next to Brad Pitt because he was our cousin who died. Then he played Cracker Jack in Four Brothers. Then he played Tron.
Yeah, the guy in Tron.
And now he's on Netflix and he's in was it Triple Frontier?
Yeah, Triple.
Dude, that guy just ripped now as the MMA guy.
I liked Four Brothers. I thought it was.
It's the
really
most
cool.
quotable, I
Yeah.
think. We talked about.
Really?
About
You think so? Then Boyz N Da Hood?
I mean, it
Says
has that
the man
crazy
who
brother,
like.
it has just like that brotherly dialogue.
No,
right?
I liked
It's a
it.
corny
So,
movie
yeah.
too. I really we've talked about this. I really feel that there's a lot of parts that I swear Mark Wahlberg had to have been improvising.
I mean, that's his action movie, right? I mean, like that's John Singleton's action film.
And he also cast Andre 3000, which it's like, okay, you know, his star was on the rise. He was huge with Outkast. I did not think Andre 3000 was very good in that movie. He's since become a very good actor. He played Jimi Hendrix impeccably, but in Four Brothers, he wasn't terribly good.
And
he was
I think
all right.
maybe that spoke to like John Singleton in cast. I mean, again, I don't know what casting director he worked with, but you know, he casts a lot of people who are huge figures in pop culture, like, and they weren't always necessarily the biggest or greatest actors and actresses. Sometimes it worked, like Tyrese, but like I didn't think Janet Jackson was the best choice. Tupac was excellent. Snoop Dogg was in Baby Boy.
Yeah.
He was great in
Yeah,
Baby
Snoop
Boy.
was good.
Yeah. Even Tyra
Ice
Banks,
Cube.
I didn't like.
No,
as
Tyra
much.
Banks was terrible in Higher Learning.
See, we could agree on
Yeah, no,
something.
Tyra Banks was-
Yeah, so sometimes it worked and it didn't, but he always had that relevant.
Why would you
Even-
tell me what you think? I was like, okay, overacting.
You really? Is it just John Singleton? Or can you do that with? Oh no, you do that also with the Godfather movies. He's great at
Oh, he can
reciting.
do every movie
Yeah.
that's as long as it's before 1997.
I'm telling you, do a one-man
I want
show.
you to use all your powers. I know
Yeah.
your skills.
You have like this
I don't want his
impeccable
mother to
gift.
see him like this.
Maybe it was all those years of working at Blockbuster.
Look what you did to my boy.
The Blockbuster alumni.
Thank you. Two of us.
Alumnus.
So how about
Oh, you're a Blockbuster guy too? I didn't
I worked
know
at
that.
Blockbuster.
Yeah.
You guys
yeah.
ever worked there at the same time?
did not. No.
I worked at Daddy
You
though.
meet up again.
Yeah, that would have been Jay and Silent Bob. Okay, no, Four Brothers also. I don't have cable anymore, but at one point when I was still in my old apartment, you put on TNT day, night, afternoon, late night, whatever. Four Brothers, or Predator, or Sniper is on.
Yeah,
And
that was
typically
in heavy rotation.
I swear, this one night they did like a Four Brothers marathon. It was the same movie 9 times
But
back to back.
it was a type of movie that you can watch at any point in the film and not feel. You didn't
Yeah,
have to
like
watch
you're
them
not
start
missing out.
just
Yeah.
because it was such a great dynamic.
But the one redeeming quality, and I credit this specifically to John Singleton about Four Brothers, is they took those 4 actors. You got Garrett Hedlund, Mark Wahlberg, Andre 3000, and Tyrese, and he really emphasized and he stressed the fact, it's like, hey, you guys really have to sell this concept that you guys are these 4 miscreants who this old lady brought together, and you guys are even closer than blood brothers. They say it so many times in the movie. It's like, hey man, I wouldn't knock on my brother either. And that kid's like looking around. He's like, you guys are brothers? It's like, yeah, this is my brother Cracker Jack. This is my brother Angel. And the guy's like, but they really drove that point home. How these guys would give their lives for each other.
Yeah, I liked it.
I liked it too.
Bobby, yeah, Jack, come on, man.
Half
help!
or 3/4 of this podcast is gonna be
That
Jason
also had Taraji P. Henson. She was Andre 3000's wife.
reciting.
No,
lines.
So he did a couple more. John Singleton did a couple more movies, right? Like, Hustle and Flow. And
Which he
then-
was just a producer, I think.
he didn't
actually
direct
direct
that.
it.
And
yeah.
Black Snake Moon, did he direct that one? I thought he directed that one.
Oh,
He
was that
produced that, I
his?
believe.
I don't think he directed that either.
Oh, wait, we completely skipped over Too Fast, Too Furious. That was my least favorite of the Fast and the Furious movies, I gotta say.
I don't even remember because I'm not a
It's
huge
not my least
fan
favorite,
of the
but it's one
franchise.
of my least favorite ones from Fast and the Furious for sure.
I remember.
You're the biggest Fast and the Furious fan in the company, but would you say...
Am I the biggest Fast and Furious fan
Yeah,
in the
would you
company?
say
Wow.
that's consensus though? Like a lot of people just do not like part 2.
No,
don't even remember
Tokyo
part
Drift is
2.
part 2 actually.
That's
right?
the only one that Vin
I like
Diesel is not
Tokyo
in.
Drift. Who
So-
directed that one?
I don't know.
Right, that's the
Justin Lin.
part 2 is the only one that Vin Diesel is not in, and they also replaced.
Yeah, and Paul Walker's not in it too. Tokyo Drift is the one with
No,
that.
part 2 Paul Walker is in.
No, he's not.
It's Paul Walker and Tyrese.
No, or that's Too Fast, Too Furious.
Yeah, Too Fast, Too
Oh
Furious.
yeah, there's
Tokyo Drift is
on
not
the
that one.
poster.
Yeah, and they replaced
he was
Ja
in it.
Rule with Ludacris
Yeah.
as the IT guy. And,
Wait, no. Ja Rule was never the IT guy. Ja Rule was the racer in part one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Cole Hauser again.
Asha, you're a big fan of the franchise of the Fast and the Furious? No.
No,
Oh.
because Chris Hemsworth is not in it.
Yeah.
So.
What is up?
There's
Do you
an
remember
Hemsworth in
Asha?
it.
Okay, I'm looking at one. I'm looking through Jason's notes, and it got a terrible Rotten Tomatoes score. Abduction in 2011, but it has the guy.
Yeah, Taylor
the Jacob
Lautner.
guy, Taylor Lautner.
Team Jacob.
Yeah, the movie's
I
trash.
don't think I've ever watched that.
It
Just so you know.
was it the one that had to do with the phone book? For some reason, I remember the preview, a phone booth. Did I say phone book?
There is
I
a
meant-
phone booth. And,
No,
Yeah.
that's the one with Colin Farrell.
But
No, I don't think I've ever seen that one.
I don't.
that movie's trash.
You
That
know,
movie is
everybody
not
has
good.
missteps in their career.
Yeah, that is not a
Even
good
we've
movie.
had some duds among the things we've produced here at KOAM.
Wait, John
so-
Singleton made that movie? That's one of his movies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Direction.
Oh, wow.
Oh dang, I didn't know that. No, I've never seen it.
Okay, so now that unfortunately John Singleton is no longer with us, he's left us. What is his lasting legacy, in both of your opinion? Like, what is, when people look back on his work in like 30 years, they're either going to say he was known for.
I think the fact that he could tell stories that were so authentic and real and really no frills. You know, they're just so pure, and his characters were so well developed that we remember every name of every character to this day. Right? They just stay with you. I think that's to me that's his legacy, and then also the fact that, you know, he was this young guy that came out of film school. I think for any aspiring filmmaker, it shows that, you know, if you're true to your craft and what you want to do, that you can, you can succeed and, you know, reach.
And he wasn't just
your
some kid
goals
off the
and
street. I
dreams.
mean, he went to USC Film School, so he has a pedigree.
Yeah.
But who are some of the other incredibly well-known USC film school grads?
I know he's not really known as a filmmaker, but Will Ferrell went there.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot. You're putting me on the spot. Do you know
No.
off the top of your head?
Would you say that, I mean, not to marginalize, I mean, marginalize is the wrong word, but would you say that because of the state of the country in the early 90s, around like 92, because you had, you know, the East Coast, West Coast, you know, rap battles, that he kind of gave the West Coast experience and, you know, the whole South Central LA thing, he gave that community and that culture like a voice the same way that Spike Lee did for the East Coast?
No, I think it's apples and oranges. I think he just wrote what he knew, and he told these real authentic stories that transcended, you know, being from one area or region or.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're just very fortunate to have had somebody like him to showcase that type of environment and struggle. You know, I mean, it led the way for, you know, other directors and people to, you know, kind of explore that genre a bit more, or that setting. So, I mean, I think that's going to be his legacy. You know, he did Boyz N Da Hood. It's like the typical story of the young black man's plight on the West Coast, right? And like, that's going to be forever associated with him, I think. Like, that's, you know, I mean, it's not the only thing he ever did, right? He obviously did so much good or he obviously did so many movies, but, you know, I think certainly that's going to be one of the ones that have had the biggest impact, you know, like from that point on. Like, I can't think of a movie before that really showcased that. So, you know, but I can think of many after, right?
Like
So,
immediately after,
yeah.
right? It kind of set off like a
I know,
trend.
it's like 2
in
years, like, or the next year was Menace to Society. The
The
year after that's like Dead Presidents or whatever. Well, I mean, even though that's not like really
South Central and yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's
It broke down a lot of stereotypes of people, you know, that you didn't really get to know the characters like you did in that film.
Yeah. Tremendous filmmaker, though. Yeah. Real big loss.
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
So, guys, I think that will do it for today's episode of Real Talk. As always, you can catch us every Tuesday on the KUAM Podcast Network or here on Facebook, or if you're watching this video. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, Tango Theaters, where you can watch Detective Pikachu, the new Pokemon movie, this weekend. And we will see you guys next time.